I don't have anything clever to open with here. The best sentiment I can give going into this video is that Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, is an absolute travesty. You know, Halloween's original outing is literally my favourite slasher of all time. You only need to watch the first minute of my video on that one from a few days back to understand that I hold it in very, very high regard. It is a testament then to how low this franchise's dips are that even when including that incredible masterpiece from 1978, this is probably my least favourite slasher series, at least out of the ones I'm covering this month. While I don't think any of the other big slasher franchises, even with the incredible highs of Scream, the imaginative peaks of Nightmare on Elm Street, and the damn fun time of my personal love Jason Lives, ever quite reach the unmatchable greatness of that first instance of Michael Myers picking up a knife, none of them do what Halloween does and insert a whole trilogy slap bang in the middle of the franchise that at best I do not like, and at worst I actively loathe. Scream is pretty consistent across the board. Nightmare has its big dips with 5 and 6, but they're not without some merit, and Friday the 13th might be a mixed bag the entire franchise, but it never hits the 3-in-a-row hat-trick of hatred streak that we have here. Halloween 6 is the final film in the Thorn trilogy, my personal series low point that is mentioned in previous videos, but I'll repeat again here for any newcomers, was the series' way of bouncing back from the commercial misfire of a Michael Myers-less Halloween 3. Firstly bringing the pale masked murderer back for a return to form, if not a bit paint by the numbers formulaic slasher that to its credit had what could have been a real game changing ending, before then bafflingly switching course and doubling down on the supernatural and occult aspects of the characters, quickly setting up plot points in the 5th entry that revolved around cults, cursed tattoo markings, mysterious men in black, and telepathic familial links, with absolutely no idea where any of this was going in the next entry, even when the film ended with an obviously sequel-baiting cliffhanger. Which of course brings us now up to Halloween 6, the low point of the low point. Once again, I'm not going to repeat myself. I've gave you this speech before on the Jason Goes to Hell video about how I wanted to prioritise celebratory content on this channel and find the good and the bad, but I've got to say, in my sincerest opinion, that's simply not possible with Halloween 6. This film is an incomprehensible train wreck. I say, with absolutely no hyperbole, that I have seen narratively nonsensical student films that have failed to pass their classes that are more cohesive and better assembled than this movie. I want to stress that I mean that. I'm not exaggerating for crassness' sake, I genuinely believe this. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be facetious. On a technical basis, this is obviously a lot more professionally shot than those. It's probably better technically than anything I could ever put out. You know, it's got a budget, it's got professional lighting, professional camera setups, a huge crew to do lots of impressive Hollywood level things. There's complex tracking shots, there's elaborate locations, scenes with lots of extras. That's not the part I'm criticising here. Purely on plot and the execution of that plot through editing choices, the final product is a complete fucking mess. There's literally just no nice way to say it. It's contrived to the point of being borderline gibberish at times, and taken as a whole, it's just absolutely fucking dreadful. How the hell did this happen? Well, this, ladies, gentlemen, and NBs, is the perfect example of the phrase, making it up as you go along. As already noted in yesterday's vid, a lot of threads were put into Halloween 5, and to a lesser extent even a little of Halloween 4, with no clue where they were going. And when I say no clue, I mean these people had not one sodding clue what any of this was about. Daniel Farrens, who wrote this 6th film, before he started actually called up the writers of both Halloween 4 and 5 and asked what they had in mind when they put all these unanswered threads in. He thought maybe they had some sort of rough idea perhaps in their head where they expected this stuff to go, or some kind of starting point at least. Just any kind of baton he could take and run with, and they had absolutely nothing. According to Farrens, he was just left to pick up the pieces, so already not a good starting point. And Farrens was not the first to try his hand at making sense of all this. This film went through multiple, completely different drafts. Phil Rosenberg wrote the first ever, called Halloween 666, nice, The Origin, and it is also hot garbage. To give you some quick highlights, Michael is a homeless man, which I suppose he already kind of is, being an escaped patient and all, but like, he's literally depicted as a homeless wanderer in this, and it has the incredibly implausible reveal that Michael has, would you believe it, another secret sister besides Laurie Strode. Returning character Tommy, a child who survived the first film's killing spree, is now an adult with a VR Ouija board that allows him to see into the past and find out that Michael Myers was cursed by the gods, and at one point, Michael murders someone with a rat. Apparently this script was actually thrown across the room by series producer Mustafa Akkad after he read it. And Scott Spiegel, Evil Dead 2's co-writer who was paid to direct this version of the film, said in an interview with Fangoria that he was actually relieved when he lost the job, saying, "The script that we were going to shoot at the time was going to be hard to overcome. And my feeling was that I didn't need to be the one to make a crummy sequel to what had been a decent series of films." Tarantino was offered a shot at it at one point, but never got further than brainstorming an opening when Michael Myers and the Man in Black went on a road trip down Route 66, murdering everyone at each stop they made along the way, before ultimately he turned the job down. Carpenter was asked to return and suggested to set the film in a space station. Yeah, there was a brief moment where Michael X was a possible thing. Not to be confused with Malcolm X, very different movie. And although I can't find a source for it other than this random What Culture listicle, allegedly the suggestion was thrown around to reveal that series mainstay Dr. Loomis was Michael's dad, and in another draft, that Michael's mother was being kept as a sex slave by the Man in Black. I really hope that's not true. You would perhaps think, after having heard a lot of what we could have got, that the curse of Michael Myers we actually ended up with might be a small mercy, but it's not. It is probably about as bad as any of that other nonsense could have been. And you might think this was the fault of a lazy effort by the writer, but it's really more complex than that. Farrens was actually a huge fan of the franchise, and had been trying to get involved in making Halloween 6 since 1990, 5 years before the film's eventual release, showing up to an early meeting with a massive custom-made booklet covering all the characters and relationships previously established and where he envisioned taking the franchise from there. But after some legal battles put the film on hold for a bit, he didn't get hired until 1994 and was presumably pretty damn pumped to finally land a gig he'd been clamming for years. However, he was hired in June and they'd already scheduled shooting dates for October before he'd even typed a word. Plus, he obviously had to play with the terrible cards he'd been dealt, namely tying up all those nonsensical loose ends previous writers had left him. While I don't personally believe there was ever a good film in development at any point, after all it was Farrens' decision as early as his first draft to double down on the Cult of Thorn shtick and had a weird focus on Michael's sexually deviant behaviour, something he personally theorised the character always had. There was probably at least a better film than what we got before this already ill-advised script and mythology got the too many kooks treatment as the film was created. Though Farrens is the only credited writer, this film, according to him, went through 10 redrafts throughout production and crossed multiple hands who all had differing levels of input and revisions, in the end creating something that even Farrens, who literally wanted to explain Michael's mythology, admits went too far in its explanations. And this 10 redrafts through the production line is easy to believe when you consider this film is almost gibberish in its final form, literally feeling like a Frankenstein's monster of a million different writers' ideas. And that it has a distinctly different producer's cut with like 45 minutes of differing footage, a totally different colour grade and score, and a completely different ending, creating an experience that's a little better in some places, a little worse in others, but still, overall, just really rather bad. But that's a whole other story I'll touch on as this video develops. God, production on this thing sounds like an actual nightmare. Add to this a snowstorm that disrupted early filming and forced multiple location changes, the producer and the director fighting deadlines by rewriting the ending on set shot to shot like it was a fucking improv night, test screenings producing miserable results, and things getting so bad that Miramax had to step in and take over the film's production, ordering reshoots on top of already reworked scenes, including scenes which featured actor Donald Pleasance, who had at this point passed away, and you have the recipe for an absolute shit show. And I suppose at this point I should probably tell you what that shit show looks like. You'll notice I've got really far into this video now and I haven't even started on the plot, or plots if you include the producer's cut, and part of that is because the production is so messy there's a lot to talk about there, but another part of it is just because I don't have a fucking clue what happens in this thing. I've seen this movie twice now for this video, and I have no fucking idea what any of it is about. If you asked me to describe the plot, I'd struggle to articulate it to you. I am at a loss. I can tell you little bits. I can tell you there's a cult who kidnapped Jamie and Michael at the film's opening. I can tell you that the character of Jamie Lloyd, who I thought was the saving grace of the previous two movies, is played by a different woman and killed off really unceremoniously in like the first 10 to 20 minutes. Or survives up until the very end if you're watching the producer's cut, but spends most of the runtime off screen in a coma until she's shot in the head. Both versions treat this character horrendously. I don't need to get into another rant about how much it bothers me when slasher sequels take away the narrative victories of their heroes from prior films. If you've been watching this show since day one, Lord knows you've had enough of that. But needless to say, I hate this, and that's not even the biggest bullshit surrounding this character. Firstly, her actress change is surrounded in controversy. According to Danielle Harris, who was 17 at the time and wanted the role so badly she paid to have herself legally emancipated so she could be free to make the decision to take it on, she was officially cast for the part. But then they turned around and offered her a scaled $1,000, which didn't even cover her emancipation fees. She asked for more, and in interviews she stressed she wasn't asking for like a crazy amount or anything, but allegedly the head of casting refused to negotiate her salary, stating that, "You're a scale character who dies in the first 20 minutes. So she dropped out and they brought in JC Brandy as a replacement. So that's bullshit. Nothing against the actress who replaced her, of course, it's just this really obviously sucks for Danielle and anyone who had grown to like her in the role. And secondly, besides dying, her only role in this film was to pop out a baby before disappearing. Whose baby, you ask? Well, that's another whole story and depends on which cut you watch. In the theatrical release, it's never really established who the dad is, and there's a random cutaway when they're in the cult compound of like fetuses suspended in walls and shit at some point, which I really didn't understand on first viewing, but now I think is meant as a way to explain the child's origin as being some kind of test tube baby experiment on the cult's part. And in the producer's cut, oh boy, the child is it's Michael and Jamie's incest baby, who it's heavily implied assaulted Jamie at the demand of the cult. Dear God, no thank you, absolutely not. This feels so wrong. And I don't just mean in the general sense that an incest baby is a pretty gross sensationalist little side add-on that this series did not need, but also in the sense that this feels narratively wrong. Like, my understanding of Michael and everything we've seen him to be implies, at least to me, that he's just not a sexual being at all. Like, I don't think he knows how. Yeah, he has a hyperfixation on mostly female victims, and obviously there's that strange relationship with his sister and his actions against her that all have a kind of uncomfortable undertone. But I always took Michael's violence in that sense to be some kind of method of acting out when not understanding what to do with any strange urges. If Michael's condition is psychosexual, as Farrington believes, which is still debatable somewhat, but let's just say we follow that reading, then it's specifically violence instead of sex, not sexual violence, if that makes sense. I mean, he murders like everybody who shags. Sex is not something he truly understands. Surely, is that just me? Am I alone in this reading? I think I'm making sense. Am I making sense? Either way, incest baby's a fucking weird choice, and one of the few ways I think the theatrical cut might be better, even if its answer to the question seems to be random fetus wall. Now, what else happens in this film? Well, Paul Rudd is a major character in this, and he is terrible. Just absolutely dreadful in the role. Completely stilted line delivery, a totally confused performance, and just weirdly unexpressive. I don't think his bad performance is necessarily his fault. I mean, we've all seen Paul Rudd in things where he's effortlessly charismatic and fun to watch, but the weird reserved character he plays here is either completely out of his skill set, or really badly directed, or written, or some combination of all three. This is actually his first film, and I'm honestly shocked he got work after it. I mean, I'm glad he did. Dude's Paul Rudd, guy's great. But if I'd only seen him in this, I wouldn't be keen to cast him in anything else. He plays returning character Tommy Doyle, one of the children from the original Halloween who survived, now all grown up and obsessed with Michael Myers. He's the guy that uncovers the whole Thorn cult stuff. Apparently Michael was inflicted with the druidic curse of Thorn. This film's explanation for the tattoo on his wrist shared by the man in black that was introduced and not explained in the previous movie. It's kind of this film's central revelation. Basically, Michael isn't necessarily bad, I think, but he was cursed by this cult in a way that made him doomed to slaughter all next of kin, so that I guess some blood sacrifice quota was met. And that's why Jamie's baby is so important. I think this is also the explanation given for Michael's seemingly immortal state. That's something to do with the curse too. Although I honestly could be mistaken on any of this, I'm just sort of piecing it together as I do this video. I think, and I'll be honest, I had to skim Wikipedia to confirm a lot of this, the basic premise is that Jamie and Michael were kidnapped by the cult at the start of the movie. Jamie is impregnated for some reason, and by different methods depending on which version you watch. I'm not sure why, as it seems Michael just had to kill what was left of his family for whatever ritual was planned here. Feel like he could have just killed Jamie and had one less target rather than the cult making her have a baby so he'd have another. That bit's still a little lost on me. Especially because in the film's final act they reveal that the baby was the result of the rather ridiculous partnership between the cult and Smith Grove Psychiatric Hospital, where Michael used to be kept and Loomis used to work. Apparently, those two institutions teamed up to clone Michael's evil. What? I mean, even if we put aside the absolute absurdity of the sentence I have just delivered, doesn't that, not align with the rest of the film's absurdities? The baby's on a sacrificial altar at the film's opening. Was that just for shits and giggles? Is Michael not trying to kill the child? Isn't he supposed to be destined to do so because he's got to kill all familial links? And no, that's not an invitation to explain this to me. In the nicest possible way, I promise you, I do not care and it will not make the film better for me. Because the thing is, even if this does all somehow make sense, it's so overly contrived, ridiculous, badly assembled, and inconsistent. It would be just as awful even if I could wrap my head around all of it. Now I know with every movie, no matter how bad, there will always be some defenders. I know there's every possibility that someone in the comments on this vid who's an avid lover of the movie might pull the whole, "oh, you just don't get it," or "oh, if you just paid more attention" card. And look, if you love the movie, more power to you. Enjoy the hell out of it. I'm happy that you like it. Truly, I am. But before you suggest me not really comprehending this film's events without consulting third-party materials is my fault, ask yourself why not just me, but also, from having now looked, many others all find this film convoluted, contrived, and messy, and can't bring themselves enough to care to try and comprehend its poorly edited plot. Even if you assume that all the overly expository mysticism stuff is good, actually, and all this contrived cult nonsense is fine and dandy, the rest of the film still falls completely on its arse at every hurdle. There is so much going on in this film, and absolutely none of it is compelling, scary, or even remotely interesting. Yeah, okay, I suppose I can generally follow the plot somewhat. I get that at its most basic simple premise, it's about Tommy Doyle finding out about Michael Myers' curse and everyone trying to save Jamie's baby from Michael and the cult after finding him where she hid him at a gas station before she died. I comprehend that. It's a bad story, poorly told, but I generally understand that's the gist. But there's a million other narrative threads, ridiculous contrivances, and baffling creative decisions I'm not even mentioning, totally disconnected from all this nonsense. Right, when Jamie escapes from the cult with her baby thanks to the help of a midwife, she runs to another location and calls into, of all places, a shock jockey radio station, speculating on conspiracy theories surrounding Michael Myers to say she's being chased by him, calling out something along the lines of, "Dr. Loomis, if you're hearing this, he's coming. And Loomis happens to have this exact station on at this exact time because he seems like a dude really tuned into the goings on of radio shock jockeys, and he hears her cry. I'm sorry, that's just dumb. It's contrived, it's nonsensical, and I simply do not buy it. And I'm not wanting to point out plot holes and contrivances and go, oh, this makes the movie bad. What I want you to understand though is it's not just this. It's that the whole film is like this. And that's just one example of ridiculous writing besides the whole evil cult baby stuff, and it happens in the first 5 minutes. That's not all, of course. There's a whole subplot where the town of Haddonfield are trying to ban Halloween that goes absolutely nowhere. The big reveal of who the man in black is? It's just Dr. Loomis's old co-worker from Smith's Grove, a character who has like 5 seconds of screen time in the first film, and who we've otherwise not met outside of his mysterious man in black persona until this movie, in which he plays an extremely minor and forgettable role until the point of his reveal. That's a narratively satisfying conclusion to your central mystery, isn't it? That doesn't fall flat at all. Want more? There's an entire family who mostly exist to die, but 2 of which play a huge role in the film, and all of them are apparently related to Laurie Strode and live across the road from Tommy. The main 2 important ones here are this lady Cara and her son Danny, who gets really intense and seems a bit stabby when Cara's abusive father gets physical with her. Would you believe that this goes nowhere and actually their plot ends up being that Danny and Cara are important to the cult as they're going to somehow be used as a means for the cult to clone another evil Michael baby? Well, you better believe it, because that's what happens. Had enough with overcomplications and just want an example of a scene that just falls flat? Okay, wanna guess how Michael is finally confronted in this film at the end? You know, that showdown all these movies build up to. Well, of course, we just have Paul Rudd beat him with a pipe while using this awful flashy montage transition effect to undermine any sense of physicality it might have had, and then Michael bleeds this brownish yellow. I mean, come on. What the fuck is any of this about? This is disastrous. Doesn't help as well that the theatrical cut is given that horrible stylistic choice of random transition cuts consisting of sudden flashes of frantic music video style horror visuals. Oh yeah, that's not just for the Paul Rudd fight scene, that's a stylistic choice present through the whole movie, as if the film isn't already hard enough to follow. The producer's cut at least doesn't have these, but it's just as confusing and messy. Its ending sees the baby put on a sacrificial altar and Michael about to kill him, as this will then pass the curse onto Cara's kid Danny, who will then kill Cara and I guess become the new Michael. This does explain, of course, that at some point in production the baby killing was the planned plot point, and that's why it feels like that's where the film's going up until the baby is a Michael clone reveal of the theatrical cut. But regardless, this is still just as contrived and wrapped up in layers of nonsensical mysticism that are so far removed from the simplicity of this character that once made him special. Anyway, the main cast, that is to say Tommy, Cara and Danny, escape with the kid when Michael is stopped from killing him after he finds out the child is his. And then Tommy uses rune magic to stop Michael pursuing them. Loomis helps them escape and goes back to kill Michael, but when he removes Michael's mask, he finds out it's his old colleague and cult leader, Dr. Wynn, who passes on to him the symbol of Thorn, and the film ends with Michael getting away and Loomis screaming at his newfound cult leadership status. There is no good version of this film. There is simply a terrible one and a slightly less terrible one. Although the producer's cut makes a bit more sense, it foreshadows reveals a bit more, Wynn is a bigger character, other stuff gets explained a little better, and it's nowhere near as obnoxious in its editing, it's still just an overcomplicated mess of a movie, and although better overall, is even worse in some aspects, like the whole incest baby thing. Whichever version of the movie you watch, the film's messy, overcomplicated production is always seen clear as day in the end result through its messy, overcomplicated plot. There is nothing to like here, at least not that I can personally find. The film doesn't even work as a turn your brain off slasher movie. It's never dumb enough to be fun, just mildly confusing. And on the rare occasions it attempts to be something resembling a Halloween film, it's a really bloody dull one. Every kill is neither shocking, nor tense, nor scary. At best, the biggest physical reaction any of these things will elicit from you is an uninterested shrug. Even Donald Pleasance, who is fantastic, cannot elevate this thing. I'm really sorry to say I want to find something positive about it, but honestly, it's just garbage. It is a textbook example of how much the mistakes of pre-production and production can leak into the end product. A physical representation of the saying, too many cooks spoils the broth. It is astoundingly awful. It fails on every level. It's not a good Halloween film, it's not a good slasher, it's not a good occult movie. It's simply not a good film, period. It's dreadful. I like this film less than Freddy's Dead. I like this film less than Jason Goes to Hell. For all of their similar flaws with overcomplicated mythology and contrived nonsense, they were at least better assembled and never quite reached the levels of confusing and messy as this thing does. This is, in my opinion, the single worst movie I am going to cover this month. The only way I can recommend it is as an exercise in deconstruction. Don't watch it for fun in any capacity, because you simply won't find it. Watch it solely to take it apart, look at what went wrong, and try and understand why. Yes, there was a bad production, but there's so many elements that make this film not work, that it's not as simple as that. It is a combination of bad ideas, bad executions, and honestly, to be fair to them, just dramatic misfortunes that very unfortunately turned out the worst possible result that all those aspects could bring to the table. And in that sense at least, it's kind of fascinating, but boy am I glad I'm done talking about it. And that is my least favourite movie to be covered this month, done and dusted. Yes, I like it less than Halloween 8 before you ask in the comments. I would 100% rather watch Busta Rhymes do Kung Fu on Michael Myers than this any day of the week. But we'll get to that one. Not before though visiting a different Halloween timeline where Laurie is alive, with Halloween's 20th anniversary film, which we'll be discussing tomorrow. So if you don't want to miss that, be sure to subscribe to my OnlyDans at the red button below and hit the bell for notifications. Also be sure to like if you enjoyed the video and comment with your thoughts, and of course, if you're really enjoying what I'm doing and would like to support the channel, then you can do so by becoming a patron and gain access to some fun exclusives for your troubles at the Patreon link in the description below. And that's all from me for today. Now all that's left is the sign off, so as always, I've been Dan Drambles, you're watching Wholesome Halloween 2 Slasher Season, and I will see you tomorrow.